With the growing amount of electronic waste piling up like mountains these days, not everything in the scrap pile is truly broken, and sometimes there is still gold hidden in the sand. Because in reality, a huge number of electronic devices get thrown away not because they are completely dead, but simply because one small part is no longer usable. A perfect example is this old laptop charger in today's video. At first glance it looks worthless since the connector plug that goes into the laptop is either damaged or missing, but the most valuable part inside it, the entire power supply circuit, is still functioning perfectly fine and delivering stable output just like it was designed to do. And that is exactly the part many people overlook before tossing these devices into the ever-growing mountain of electronic waste. The truth is, components like this still carry a surprisingly high reuse value when placed in the right project. So instead of ending up as meaningless waste, this old laptop charger is about to take on a completely new role today, becoming the main power supply unit for the recycled soldering iron project featured in this video. And of course, I would not be repurposing this old laptop charger into something pointless once you understand what a soldering iron is actually designed to do. So first, let me explain how a soldering iron really works. Unlike heavy-duty welding equipment that needs extremely high temperatures to melt solid metal, a soldering iron actually only needs to generate just enough heat to melt solder wire, allowing small electronic components to be joined together securely. That also means a soldering iron is not a device that demands extremely high power output. What it mainly needs is a stable power source capable of delivering continuous electrical current so the heating element can maintain a consistent working temperature throughout the process. And this is exactly why an old laptop charger turns out to be more useful here than most people would expect. Even though it can no longer power a laptop because the connector plug is missing, its core function remains the same. It is still a stable power supply designed to deliver electricity continuously for long periods of time. Simply put, instead of becoming electronic waste just because one small connector is gone, this charger still has more than enough capability to serve a new purpose, and in this case, it will become the power source for the recycled soldering iron project featured in this video. With the two existing output wires coming from this charger, I am going to extend their length by connecting an additional piece of wire to each end, creating a longer cable that will be much more practical for the assembly process in the next steps. Once the wire extension is finished, I will use heat shrink tubing to secure and protect the electrical connections, making the joints much stronger while also reducing the risk of short circuits during use. Next, I have an old spark plug and it is going to be repurposed for another important part of this build. Specifically, it will serve as the front soldering section, helping hold the soldering tip firmly in place while also creating a direct connection to the positive side of the power supply, allowing electricity to flow toward the heating element. But to make sure the heat transfer process remains stable and does not run into any problems during operation, I still need to add a short bypass wire connecting the spark plug tip directly to the spark plug body, allowing the electrical flow to move through the entire system much more smoothly. With the remaining wire, which is the positive wire connected directly from the charger, I will attach it to the spark plug in order to complete the electrical pathway, allowing power from the charger to be delivered properly to the soldering section so the whole system can function as intended. This electrical connection is not suitable for heat shrink tubing like the previous sections. So instead I will use electrical insulation tape wrapped around the outside, helping secure the connection while also keeping everything safe during operation. What I am holding in my hand right now is an electrical connector, and I am going to repurpose it as an intermediate part that connects the custom-made soldering tip with the spark plug connector, helping both components stay firmly attached while maintaining proper electrical conductivity for the system to work as intended. Through many different recycled soldering iron projects I have made before, these dead AA batteries have always proven to be surprisingly useful. Because instead of treating them as completely worthless waste, the metal core hidden inside the battery can actually be repurposed and crafted into a recycled soldering tip for a project like this one. With the remaining wire, which is the negative wire connected directly to the laptop charger, I will attach an alligator clip to the end so it can create a more flexible connection point, making it much easier to clamp onto the material that needs to be soldered during operation. And this right here is the alligator clip I mentioned a moment ago, which will serve as a quick connection point, allowing me to easily attach it to the parts that need to be soldered once the entire system is fully assembled. At this point, the entire system is almost fully assembled, but it seems like we are still missing one pretty important component before this device can actually start working. Can you figure out what it is? Go ahead and take a guess before I install the final piece. That's right, the part 1 temporarily set aside earlier was the power cable, the final missing piece needed to complete the entire system and allow this recycled soldering iron project to finally operate the way it was designed to. At this point everything has been fully assembled, and now there is only one final step left, connecting the entire system to a power source so we can finally test how this recycled soldering iron is going to perform in action. After completing the first successful tests, it is clear that this recycled soldering iron is working quite reliably and performing exactly the way I hoped when I first started building this idea. And what I find most interesting is not simply the fact that I finished another DIY project, but the materials that made this entire build possible. If we look back at the beginning of this video, almost this entire system was assembled from items that most people would probably consider completely useless waste. An old laptop charger with a missing connector, a spark plug that no longer serves its original purpose, a dead AA battery, a few leftover wires, and several small discarded components that seem to have no value anymore. But there is something interesting about electronic waste. A huge number of electronic devices end up being thrown away not because they are completely broken. Sometimes only one small part has failed, while most of the internal components are still working perfectly fine. And that is exactly why I have always believed that electronic waste is not really waste if we can still recognize the next purpose it may serve. Every single day, more discarded electronics continue piling up around us, growing higher and higher, while many of them reach the end of their life far earlier than necessary simply because nobody wants to spend the time finding another use for them. Maybe the most fascinating part about recycling has never been about saving money or creating something incredibly complicated. Sometimes, it is simply about proving that many of the things we casually call trash have not actually finished serving their purpose. And sometimes all it takes is looking at something differently, because what seems like waste today can still become something valuable tomorrow.